AITA for refusing to give up my grandmother's $5.2 million house after my mother sued me? I'm Charlotte, 35, and I have spent most of my life being the daughter who showed up early, stayed late, and somehow still got told I was difficult. My mother, Vivian, is 62. My younger brother, Derek, is 31. He has always been the person in our family who could make a mess and somehow turn the cleanup into someone else's responsibility. For years, the standard explanation was that Derek was under pressure. He forgot Grandma Evelyn's birthday once because he had gone away for a weekend with friends. Your brother has a lot going on, Mom told me. He borrowed money from our Aunt Camille and took almost a year to pay back half of it. He's trying, Mom said. He missed a family dinner he had specifically asked Grandma to move to a different night. Charlotte, stop keeping score. Meanwhile, if I said I couldn't drive 40 minutes across town at 8 at night because Derek had locked himself out of his apartment again, I was called cold. That was the family math. Derek needed help. I was capable of helping. Therefore, if I didn't help, I was the problem. Grandma Evelyn never followed that math. She was 84 when she died. The last 2 years of her life were more difficult for her physically, but she wasn't confused. Her knees were bad. Her hands shook. She needed help carrying laundry downstairs and sometimes opening medication bottles. Her mind, though, was sharp enough to make the rest of us look lazy. She still remembered the exact date the property taxes were due. She corrected pharmacists when they mixed up prescription refill dates. She noticed when her electric bill increased by $19 and wanted to know why. She kept appointment reminders on little yellow cards near the phone, even though I also put them in my calendar. Once, when my mother suggested in front of me that Grandma might be getting a little mixed up lately, Grandma looked over her reading glasses and said, "My hands shake, Vivian. My mind does not." Mom laughed like it was charming. Grandma didn't. I was the family member who handled most of the practical stuff. I picked up prescriptions, drove her to appointments when she didn't want to use a car service, changed light bulbs she could no longer reach, fixed the kitchen faucet after it started dripping, and brought soup on Sundays. Not fancy soup, usually chicken and rice or tomato basil from a place she liked. She always complained that I brought too much. Then she ate it for 3 days. I also helped her review statements because she didn't like online banking and hated automated phone systems. I never had control over her accounts. I didn't want it. She would sit at the kitchen table with the statements, and I would read out charges if the print was too small. That distinction became very important later. My mother hated how close Grandma and I had become. She never said it plainly at first. She'd make little comments. "You like feeling useful. You're always over there." She does have other family, Charlotte. One afternoon, I was replacing the rubber seal under Grandma's kitchen faucet when Mom came in and stood behind me with her purse still on her shoulder. "You know she can call a plumber," she said. "I know." "Then why do you always have to do everything?" I looked up from under the sink. "Because this takes 10 minutes. She gave me a look that had nothing to do with plumbing. "You like looking indispensable, don't you?" Grandma was sitting at the table doing a crossword puzzle. Without looking up, she said, "If you're worried about being indispensable, Vivian, you could start by coming when you say you will." The room went quiet. Mom had canceled on her twice that month. She left 20 minutes later. That was how Grandma dealt with people. She wasn't loud. She didn't give speeches. She just had a way of placing one sentence exactly where it belonged. Derek's relationship with her got strange near the end. He had always asked her for money. Not constantly, but often enough that everyone knew about it. Car repairs. Credit cards. A business idea that disappeared after 4 months. Rent after he changed jobs. Another rent problem even after he had supposedly fixed the first one. Grandma helped him more than I thought she should, but it was her money. Then she stopped. I noticed because Derek became irritated with me. One Sunday he came over while I was putting clean sheets on Grandma's bed. He stood in the doorway and said, "Did you tell her not to help me anymore?" I kept tucking the sheet under the mattress. "No. She suddenly wants receipts for everything." "That sounds like Grandma." "No, it sounds like you." I stopped and looked at him. "What exactly did you ask her for?" He folded his arms. "None of your business." Then why are you asking if I interfered? He muttered something and walked away. Later that afternoon, Grandma asked me to sit with her in the study. The study was the one room in the house that always felt untouched by time. Dark wood desk, floor-to-ceiling shelves, a green reading lamp, an old bookcase that was so heavy nobody had moved it in decades. She closed the door. That alone caught my attention. "Has Derek asked you for money again?" I asked. She ignored the question. Instead, she said, "I want you to listen to me and not argue." That usually meant she expected me to argue. Okay. Some people love access more than they love responsibility. I waited. She glanced toward the bookcase. "When I'm gone, there may be noise." "Grandma." "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Pretend death is rude to mention. I'm 84. I leaned back in the chair. She continued, "If there is trouble over my estate, let Harlan handle it. Don't wrestle in the mud with your mother." Mr. Harlan had been her estate attorney for years. What kind of trouble? The predictable kind. I wanted more than that, but she refused. Then she said something I remembered almost word for word later. "Paper has a long memory. People count on you getting tired before the paper speaks." A few months before she died, she started having more private calls with Mr. Harlan. Mom noticed. Of course she noticed. At a family dinner, she asked, "Why is Harlan suddenly at the house all the time?" Grandma took a bite of mashed potatoes. "He's my lawyer." "I know that. I mean, why now?" "Because I asked him to come." Mom glanced at me. I didn't react. Derek was unusually quiet. That was another thing I remembered later. Around the same time, Grandma asked me to stop leaving the study door unlocked when I visited. I told her nobody was going in there. She said, "Humor me." So I did. When she died, it wasn't dramatic. She had been in and out of medical appointments for months, and then one morning her body simply stopped cooperating. I was there the night before. She was tired and irritated because I had folded a stack of towels too neatly, according to her. That was the last normal thing she ever said to me. Grief in my family lasted about 4 days before the inheritance took over. Mr. Harlan scheduled the will reading after the funeral arrangements were finished and the initial probate paperwork had been filed. I remember sitting in his conference room with stale coffee in a paper cup, feeling numb. Mom sat across from me. Derek sat beside her. Aunt Camille was there, along with my cousin Iris and 2 other relatives named in smaller bequests. Mr. Harlan read the will without drama. Grandma had left specific cash gifts to several family members. Camille got her jewelry collection. Iris received a set of family antiques she had always loved. Derek received a fixed amount in cash, far less than he apparently expected. Then Mr. Harlan reached the house. The house, including the land and its contents except for specifically listed items, went to me. The most recent appraisal later valued it at approximately $5.2 million. At the time, all I heard was the sentence saying it was mine. I felt sick. Not excited. Not lucky. Sick. The house was Grandma's. The chair by the kitchen window was hers. The chipped ceramic bowl near the sink was hers. The little scratch on the hallway wall was from a chair I knocked over when I was 9. Money wasn't the first thing I thought about. My mother had a different reaction. "No." Mr. Harlan looked up. Mom said it again. "No, that's not my mother's will." He folded his hands. "It's the executed will currently admitted for probate. That's Charlotte's will." Nobody moved. I said, "Mom." She pointed at me. "You were there all the time. You drove her everywhere. You screened her calls." "I didn't screen her calls. You isolated her." Iris stared down at the table. Camille said quietly, "Vivian, this is not the place." Mom laughed once sharply. "Not the place? We just found out my daughter manipulated my elderly mother into giving her a $5 million house." Derek still said nothing. That silence bothered me almost more than Mom yelling. Mr. Harlan interrupted. "There is also a sealed instruction." Mom stopped. He lifted a manila envelope from his file. It had Grandma's signature across the flap and a notary seal. The instruction concerns Mrs. Evelyn's study. It's not to be acted upon unless certain conditions occur. What conditions? Mom asked. I'm not authorized to disclose that at this time. Her face changed. Not much. Just enough. I saw it. A flicker of something that looked less like confusion and more like fear. Then it was gone. Mom left the conference room saying she would get her own lawyer. 3 days later, a certified letter arrived at my door. I had to sign for it. That detail is burned into my memory because I was wearing socks and standing in the entryway with one shoe on when the mail carrier handed me the envelope. Inside was notice that my mother intended to contest the will. The petition alleged undue influence, isolation, lack of testamentary capacity, and inappropriate access to Grandma's financial affairs. Reading lies in legal language feels different from hearing them at a family table. Feels cleaner. Sharper. Like somebody washed the knife before handing it to you. I called Mr. Harlan first. Then I hired my own litigation attorney, Denise, because Mr. Harlan represented the estate, and not me personally. Denise read the petition and asked me a simple question. Did you ever have power of attorney over Evelyn's finances? No. Did you sign checks for her? No. Did you receive payment for caregiving? No. Did you arrange the will? No. Were you present when she executed it? No. She nodded. Good. Then don't start performing innocence for your relatives. We'll build the record. That sentence changed the way I handled everything after that. First, I still tried to explain. I answered Camille's call. I answered Iris's text. I responded to one family email. Then the pressure campaign started. An uncle wrote, "No house is worth destroying your mother over." A cousin I barely spoke to told me I should sell the property and split the proceeds for peace. One older relative left a voicemail saying, "Your mother has suffered enough." I started noticing that everyone used the same phrases. Family property. Your grandmother was vulnerable. Do the right thing. Stop making your mother fight. That told me Mom wasn't just venting. She was building a narrative. The worst moment happened at a Sunday dinner about 6 weeks after the filing. I almost didn't go. Camille called me beforehand and said, "Please, just one normal meal." I should have known better. There were disposable casserole dishes on the counter and coffee cooling in mugs nobody was drinking. People were talking too loudly about sports and weather because nobody wanted to touch the real subject. Then Derek made a comment about Grandma's house needing repairs. I looked at him. How would you know? He shrugged. Mom said the roof's old. Mom put down her fork. Because eventually the house will need to be sold. No, I said. The estate is still being litigated. Nobody is discussing a sale. She stared at me. You mean you're not discussing a sale? I mean there is no sale. Derek exhaled like I was being exhausting. Charlotte, nobody's trying to steal it from you. I almost laughed. Mom leaned forward. You stole from a dying woman, and now you want sympathy because we're trying to correct it. The whole table went silent. Camille whispered, Vivian, stop. Not firmly. Not enough. A few people stared at their plates. One relative took a sip of coffee like he hadn't heard anything. I felt heat rise into my face. For years, that would have been the moment I would have tried to explain myself. I would have listed doctor appointments, prescriptions, conversations, receipts. I would have tried to make everyone comfortable with believing me. Instead, I put my napkin on the table. That's the last time you accuse me of stealing from Grandma in a room I'm sitting in. Mom scoffed. You can't silence me. No, but I can stop volunteering to listen. I stood. From now on, all estate conversations go through counsel. Derek said, Oh, come on. I looked at him. That includes you. Then I left. In the car, my hand shook so badly I had to sit for several minutes before starting the engine. But I didn't call anyone. I didn't send a text. I didn't defend myself. The next morning, I gave Denise every piece of communication I had. That was the beginning of my counterattack. I saved voicemails with dates and timestamps. I printed family emails. I kept certified mail receipts. I requested copies of Grandma's pharmacy records and medical receipts where legally available through the estate. I found the caregiving calendar I had kept for practical reasons. It listed appointments, medication pickups, grocery runs, home repairs, and who had taken her where. I also pulled my own bank statements to show how often I had paid for small things without reimbursement. A new shower mat. Prescription copays when Grandma forgot her wallet. Groceries. A plumbing part. A replacement kettle. Nothing huge, but enough to show a consistent pattern. I had been helping her. I hadn't been extracting money from her. Denise asked the estate for full statements from Grandma's designated care account. That was when things started getting interesting. There were checks connected to Derek. Some were clearly documented as gifts. Others were not. One check had a memo line that didn't match the explanation Derek later gave. Another was written shortly before Grandma began demanding receipts from him. There were also 2 transfers that Grandma had marked with question marks on her printed statements. Mr. Harlan had copies of those statements in his files. Grandma had apparently brought them to him herself. When Denise asked Derek about the money during discovery, his written answers were vague. Grandma wanted to help me. I was under pressure. It was temporary. I don't remember the exact purpose. Mom's attorney objected to almost every follow-up question. At the same time, Mom kept pushing for the house to be sold. That made no sense. If she truly believed the will was invalid because Grandma lacked capacity, the first issue should have been determining who inherited what under the prior estate plan. Instead, Mom's proposed settlement always ended in the same place. Sell the house. Liquidate it. Divide proceeds. Resolve quickly. One evening Camille called me. I almost didn't answer. I hadn't spoken to her much since the Sunday dinner. She said, "I need to ask you something, and I know I haven't earned the right to ask comfortably." "What?" "Why is your mother acting like there's a deadline?" I sat down at my kitchen table. "What do you mean?" "She keeps saying the legal fees are wasting the estate. Then she says the market could change. Then she says Derek needs stability. It's like she needs that house sold now." I stayed quiet. Camille continued. "And every time someone mentions bank statements, Derek looks terrified." That was the first time someone in the family said it out loud. I asked, "Did he tell you anything?" "No." "Did Mom?" "No. But she keeps saying this is about fairness, and she sounds afraid of something else." I thanked her for calling. I didn't tell her what I suspected. By then, Denise and I were beginning to see the shape of it. Derek had debt. More than the family knew. Some of it was tied to failed business decisions. Some appeared to be personal. There were collection notices. There had been at least one threat of civil action from someone he owed money to. Vivian had been helping him. And Grandma had stopped. The house wasn't just an inheritance dispute. It was a rescue plan. About 8 months into the litigation, the estate completed a supervised inventory of Grandma's property. Mr. Harlan arranged for a neutral witness and a locksmith because the study was still locked and Mom had repeatedly demanded access. She was denied. The inventory day was one of the strangest days of my life. Walking through Grandma's house with legal pads, item lists, and appraisal documents made grief feel bureaucratic. The living room rug had a tag on it. The silver was photographed. Furniture was listed. The house itself was appraised at around $5.2 million, which immediately became the number everyone repeated. 5.2. 5.2. 5.2. As if Grandma had become a decimal. When we reached the study, Mr. Harlan stopped outside the door. He had the sealed instruction with him. I asked, "Are we opening it?" "Not yet." "Why?" "Your grandmother was very specific about sequence." That was all he said. We entered the study with the locksmith and inventory witness. Nothing looked disturbed. The green lamp was still on the desk. Grandma's reading glasses were in a tray beside a stack of envelopes. I looked at the old bookcase. Mr. Harlan noticed. He said nothing. The deposition phase began months later. Mom's strategy was still the same. Paint me as controlling. Make ordinary caregiving sound sinister. Her attorney asked me how often I visited, whether I ever took Grandma to appointments alone, whether I knew the contents of her prescriptions, whether I had discussed estate planning with her. I answered carefully. Yes, I visited often. Yes, I drove her alone. Yes, I knew what medications I was picking up. No, I didn't direct her estate planning. Then it was Mom's turn. That was where her story started cracking. She claimed I prevented her from visiting Grandma on a specific Thursday. Denise asked for the date again. Mom gave it. Denise slid a medical receipt across the table. Grandma had been at a specialist appointment that afternoon. I had driven her. The caregiving calendar showed it. The clinic check-in timestamp showed it. Mom then said she had meant a different day. Denise said, "We'll return to that date." Mom also claimed Grandma frequently complained that I controlled her schedule. There were no emails, texts, or notes supporting that. There were, however, messages from Grandma telling people directly when she didn't want visitors. One to Mom said, "Not today. I am tired. Don't blame Charlotte for my answer." Denise didn't smile when she read it. I did. Just a little. Derek's deposition was worse. He kept saying he didn't remember. Did Evelyn give you $12,000 on this date? I'd have to check. The check is attached. Then I guess she did. What was it for? She wanted to help me. With what? I had expenses. What expenses? I don't remember. Then Mom interrupted from across the room. Derek doesn't need to justify every private conversation with his grandmother. Denise looked at her. He does when the litigation alleges Charlotte improperly influenced Evelyn's finances. Mom went quiet. That exchange ended up mattering later. A few weeks before mediation, I got a voicemail from Mom. I had stopped answering her calls, but I saved every message. Her voice was soft. That was usually worse than yelling. "Charlotte, this has gone too far. Everybody is getting hurt. You hate when people are upset with you, sweetheart. You always have. Just do the right thing and settle this before the family is damaged beyond repair." I listened to it twice. Not because I was tempted. Because one line bothered me. You hate when people are upset with you. It sounded less like a mother pleading, and more like someone reminding me where the pressure point was. I sent the voicemail to Denise. She replied with one sentence. "Keep the original." By the time mediation arrived, 16 months had passed since the will reading. 16 months of attorney bills. 16 months of relatives treating me like the source of a conflict I hadn't started. 16 months of my mother repeating allegations she couldn't prove. The mediation conference was scheduled in a neutral office. The coffee tasted burnt. The conference table was too glossy. Mom arrived wearing the same controlled expression she used at funerals and difficult family events. Derek sat beside her and bounced one knee under the table. Camille and Iris were there because both had been identified as potential witnesses about Grandma's mental state and family relationships. Mr. Harlan attended for the estate. Denise sat next to me. The mediator began with the usual language about resolution and cost. Mom's attorney said Vivian wanted a fair family outcome. Mom added, "I just want what is fair." I didn't respond. The first hour was mostly predictable. They argued that the house was disproportionate. They argued Grandma had become dependent on me. They argued my access created opportunity for influence. Denise responded with records, appointments, emails, notarized documents, medical notes reflecting that Grandma was oriented and capable. Then Mom went too far. She said, "Charlotte made my mother afraid of me." The room got still. Her attorney looked at her. Mom continued. "She isolated her. She convinced her I only cared about money." Denise asked, "You are stating that as your position today?" "Yes." "That Charlotte caused Evelyn to distrust you?" "Yes." "And that Evelyn's statements criticizing you were the product of Charlotte's influence?" "Yes." I looked at Mr. Harlan. He looked back at me. For months, we had known the sealed instruction could be activated if certain conditions were met. What I didn't know until shortly before mediation was how specific Grandma had been. Contest the will. Allege coercion. Challenge my mental capacity. Then open the instruction. Denise had advised waiting until Mom committed to her allegations formally. Now she had. I turned slightly toward Mr. Harlan. Open it. Mom's head snapped toward me. What? Mr. Harlan placed the sealed manila envelope on the table. Mom's face changed again. That same flicker I had seen at the will reading. Fear. Mr. Harlan said. Mrs. Evelyn anticipated a contest. He broke the seal. Inside was a notarized instruction. He read only the relevant portion aloud. If the will was contested on grounds of coercion, undue influence, incapacity, or isolation by Charlotte, Mr. Harlan was authorized to retrieve materials secured in the wall safe in Evelyn's study. Mom's attorney asked, "What materials?" Mr. Harlan said, "We are about to find out." We recessed and went to the house under the procedures already arranged through the estate. Nobody wandered around. Nobody was allowed to touch anything. The study was opened. Mr. Harlan and the neutral witness moved the old bookcase just far enough to expose a section of wall behind it. There was a safe. Small. Built into the wall. I had been in that room hundreds of times and never knew it existed. Mom looked like she had. That was the moment I knew. Mr. Harlan documented the safe before opening it. Inside were several items. A notarized final wishes letter. A small digital audio recorder. A handwritten date list in Grandma's handwriting. Copies of checks. Copies of bank statements. And one sealed note addressed to Mr. Harlan. He reviewed the note first. Then he said, "The instruction says the recording is to be played if Vivian contests the will and alleges Charlotte manipulated Mrs. Evelyn." Derek immediately said, "This is ridiculous." Nobody answered him. We returned to the mediation room. Mr. Harlan documented the chain of custody. The device had been placed in the safe months before Grandma died. The dates on the handwritten list matched meetings and calls reflected in Mr. Harlan's own records. Mom's attorney asked for a chance to inspect the audio file. That happened. Then the recording was played. Grandma's voice came first. Calm. Tired. Say that again, Vivian. Then Mom. I said Derek needs stability. Grandma said, he needs consequences. Mom's voice sharpened. You know what he's dealing with. I know what he owes. A pause. Then Mom said, you're punishing him because Charlotte keeps poisoning you against him. Grandma answered, Charlotte hasn't asked me for $1. She doesn't have to ask. You're handing her everything. Another pause. Then Grandma said, the house is mine. Mom replied, it belongs to this family. No, it belongs to me. I remember looking down at the table because hearing Grandma again hit me harder than I expected. Then came the part that ended the case. Mom said, Derek can't survive another scandal. Grandma asked, what scandal? Don't play stupid. I am not the one playing. Mom lowered her voice. You give him the house or at least leave it where I can sell it. If Charlotte gets control, she'll turn everything into evidence. Derek made a noise beside her. The recording kept playing. Grandma said, evidence of what? Mom answered, of every check, every transfer, every stupid mistake he made. You know how Charlotte is. Grandma said nothing. Then Mom added, and if you leave it to her anyway, I'll contest it. The room was completely silent. Grandma asked, on what grounds? Mom gave a small laugh. Whatever works. Influence. Capacity. She's been here constantly. People already think she's controlling. Iris covered her mouth. Camille started crying quietly. The recording continued. Grandma said, you would accuse your own daughter of stealing from me when you know she has not? Mom's answer came fast. She'll settle if everyone turns on her. Charlotte hates being hated. I stopped breathing for a second. Not because it surprised me. Because I had heard almost the same strategy for 16 months. The calls. The emails. The Sunday dinner. The voicemail. All of it was in that sentence. Grandma said, you think that's what family is for? Mom replied, I'm trying to protect my son. Grandma said, By destroying your daughter? Then the recording stopped. Nobody spoke. Derek was first. That could be edited. Mr. Harlan looked at him. The chain of custody is documented. You can splice audio. The original device has been preserved. This is insane. Mom looked at me. For once there was no outrage in her face. Only panic. I said one sentence. She recorded you because she knew exactly what you would do when she was gone. Mom stood so fast her chair scraped the floor. My mother had no right to record me. Her attorney said. Vivian. She looked at him. He said it again, quieter. Vivian. That shut her up. She asked for a private break. Her lawyer took her into another room. Derek followed. They were gone for almost 40 minutes. When they came back, Mom looked smaller. Not sorry. Smaller. Her attorney announced that she was withdrawing the will contest. It was before lunch. Exactly like that. 16 months of accusations collapsed in one morning. But I didn't let them turn it into a clean exit. Denise leaned forward. Withdrawal is only the first issue. Mom's attorney looked tired. Denise continued. We require written acknowledgement that the current will is valid, and that Vivian is no longer alleging fraud, coercion, incapacity, or financial exploitation by Charlotte. Mom said, I'm withdrawing. I answered, you spent 16 months saying I stole from Grandma. You have the house. That is not the point. Her face hardened. It is absolutely the point. No, the point is you used my name as cover for Derek. Derek snapped. Leave me out of this. I looked at him. You're in it. He looked to Mom. She did what she always did. She tried to step between him and consequences. He made mistakes. I said. Then he can explain them. We demanded several things through counsel. Partial reimbursement of my legal fees based on the bad faith nature of the litigation. A formal audit of Grandma's care account. Written confirmation that the will was valid and no longer contested. A non-disparagement clause limited to false accusations involving the estate. No unsupervised access to the house. And full cooperation regarding the questionable checks and transfers. Mom didn't agree to everything immediately. Neither did her lawyer. There was still negotiation. That part wasn't dramatic. It was emails, draft language, revised clauses, bills, and more burnt coffee. But the power had changed. They no longer had a case they could use to exhaust me. And more importantly, Mom's attorney now knew why she had filed it. The audit took time. It didn't reveal some giant criminal conspiracy. Reality was messier. Derek had received money from Grandma. Some of it had been legitimate gifts. Some of it had been advances he described inconsistently. At least one payment had been made after Grandma told him she wasn't giving him more money without documentation. There were also transactions Vivian appeared to have helped arrange. The estate's accountant and attorneys handled the details. I stayed out of direct negotiations. That was another boundary I had finally learned. Derek was eventually required to repay part of the disputed amount to the estate. He fought it. Then he claimed he never thought it would get this serious. That line made me angrier than almost anything else. I said, you let Mom accuse me of stealing from Grandma for over a year. He rubbed his forehead. I didn't know she was going to take it that far. You sat next to her while she did it. I didn't know about the recording. That's not a defense. He looked exhausted. Mom said we would handle it. There it was. The entire family pattern in one sentence. Mom said we would handle it. Meaning Mom would protect him. Meaning I would absorb the damage. Meaning eventually everyone would get tired and call it peace. Not this time. The family fallout was ugly. Iris was the first person to apologize publicly. She replied to the old family email chain, the one where people had told me to return the house. Her message was short. I repeated things I had not verified. I should have asked Charlotte before I believed them. I was wrong. A few relatives replied privately instead of on the thread. That told me everything I needed to know. Camille came to see me. We sat at my kitchen table. She cried. I did not. she said. I wanted to believe Vivian because the alternative was admitting she would do something like this. I nodded. I know. I should have defended you at dinner. Yes. She flinched a little. I wasn't trying to punish her. I was just done making other people comfortable at the expense of accuracy. She said, I'm sorry. I believe you. Can we fix this? Maybe, but not because you apologized once. She nodded. That relationship has improved slowly. Iris and I are better too. Some relatives never apologized. One uncle told me I had one and should stop holding grudges. I told him I wasn't holding a grudge. I was adjusting access. He didn't like that answer. Mom's apology came 2 months after the case was withdrawn. She asked to meet. I agreed to a public place. She sat across from me and looked older than she had 16 months earlier. For a while she talked about stress, legal bills, family division, Grandma's death. Then she said, I'm sorry for how things happened. I waited. She continued. I was just trying to protect your brother. I stood up. She looked startled. Where are you going? Home. Charlotte, sit down. No. I apologized. An apology can't start with an excuse for why you tried to ruin me. Her eyes filled. You have always been so hard. That almost made me laugh. Not because it was funny, because it was so familiar. I said no. I was useful. You confused the two. She shook her head. You got everything. There it is. What? You still think this was about me getting more than Derek? It was $5 million. It was Grandma's house. You know what I mean. I do. That's the problem. She reached for my hand. I moved it. Then she said the thing that ended whatever hope I had that day. Derek was drowning. I looked at her. So you pushed me under instead. She didn't answer. I left. After the legal issues were settled enough for me to take possession without constant interference, I changed the locks. Not because I thought anyone was going to break in. Because I wanted one physical act that reflected reality. The house was under my control. Nobody got access because they demanded it. Nobody got to show up and make me feel guilty. Nobody got to use Grandma's kitchen or study as a stage for another family argument. The locksmith came on a quiet weekday morning. The sound of the drill echoed through the hallway. I stood by the front window while he worked. When he handed me the new keys, I thought I would feel triumphant. I did not. I felt tired. Then I walked into Grandma's study. I had kept it almost exactly as it was during the litigation. The desk, the lamp, the books, her reading glasses. The safe was empty now except for documentation that had already been cataloged. I placed a copy of her final wishes letter in the center drawer of the desk. Most of it was practical. Property. Personal items. Instructions. But one paragraph was for me. She wrote that I had spent too much of my life trying to prove I wasn't selfish to people who benefited from keeping me on trial. That line hurt. Because she was right. I had done it with Mom for years. With Derek. With relatives. I kept thinking that if I explained better, stayed calmer, gave more, or waited longer, eventually they would admit I was being reasonable. The lawsuit cured me of that. Not because it made me cruel. Because it made the cost visible. Every hour I spent defending myself to people who had already chosen the easier story was an hour they didn't have to examine their own behavior. So I stopped. I stopped paying for Derek's emergencies. I stopped answering family calls that began with, "You know how your mother is." I stopped attending dinners where the price of admission was pretending nothing had happened. I let Denise and Mr. Harlan finish the remaining estate matters. I kept the house. Not because it was worth $5.2 million. I kept it because Grandma wanted me to. For a while I left the study untouched. On Sundays I sometimes sat in the kitchen with coffee where she used to complain about my soup portions. The quiet felt different after the case ended. Before, silence in that house had felt like waiting for the next call, the next legal notice, the next accusation. Afterward, it felt like protection. People sometimes ask whether playing that recording was too far. I understand why they ask. It was my mother's voice. My grandmother was dead. The recording exposed things Mom never expected the rest of us to hear. But I didn't create the recording. I didn't trick her into saying those things. I didn't file the lawsuit. I didn't spend 16 months telling relatives that an innocent person had stolen from a dying woman. Grandma prepared for exactly what happened. All I did was stop protecting my mother from the consequences of her own choices. The strange part is that I used to think keeping the family together was something noble. Now I think sometimes keeping the family together just means the same person keeps absorbing the damage so everybody else can avoid discomfort. I'm not doing that anymore. I didn't win because I got the house. I won because I finally stopped begging people to believe me. It was already broken. I just stopped holding the pieces together with my own hands. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.